Hey everybody, David here at Mojo. In this week's release video is going to cover updates to the Mojo system that we're releasing today, Tuesday the 5th, December 5th. Wow, that's crazy. And also tomorrow the 6th. The reason why we do that is generally every once in a while we'll do a big update and it limits the exposure to risk. So I'm going to start out talking about the things that are coming out today in Mojo, if not already in your Mojo. And then we're going to move on to the things that you're going to see in your account starting tomorrow. So a couple things I want to cover. The first one is you're going to see some stuff today in Mojo that either we haven't announced in an update and they might look cool to you and you want them right now, or they're not in your Mojo yet. And that's because this is a development account and you may see some things and they're just not ready to be released. First thing we're going to talk about is our new contact form. And when I say new contact form, I'm referring to the size of the contact form. You can see here that we've greatly increased the size of this contact form. We've also done some other stuff. We've made it dynamic and responsive, meaning regardless of how big your browser window is on your screen, the contact form will expand and contract and it will keep all of the tolerances that you see here on the screen. Now, this was a huge request. One being the root of the request was having a larger notes area. This gives you that larger notes area. The other request we had was that folks like me that work on a big monitor, this is a MacBook Pro 15-inch, but normally I work on a 27-inch iMac, is that when we went full screen, the contact form always stayed the same size. We never benefited from all that extra real estate. Well, now that's not the case. This contact form is going to grow as your screen size grows. Of course, you can always manipulate the browser within whatever screen you're using. And again, this contact form is dynamic, and it can expand and contract with it. We made some other changes to simplify the user interface, to put things really close to your fingertips that you typically do on a contact record, either on the phone or off the phone. So let's get into that. As you might recall, prior to today's release, this button over here was called Actions for a good reason. It had a bunch of stuff in it that you can do. Well, we've taken a bunch of stuff out of that and stuck it along the top bar here, which we're going to cover in a moment. So what did we leave? Well, we changed it to More. That's the name of the button now. And we've left the ability to export the contact, assign it to a newsletter that you have scheduled each month or whatever period of time you do your newsletters in. Move it to DNC, and then also send it to any integrator that you might have Mojo connected to. You know, you see here Wise Agent, could be Boomtown, could be Top Producer, Follow Boss. You know, we have a bunch of integrations at work. You see BombBomb here. You get the idea. But we unburied a bunch of stuff people are frequently using. For example, let me get out of this action plan real quick. You'll see here that if a record is not in an action plan, you'll see a new action plan button up at the top. Before, this was in the actions area. If I want to assign an action plan, I simply click on it, I assign it, and then it's going to turn green. And that green color indicates that, hey, this person is in an action plan. What can I do with that? Well, we all know what action plans do, and if you don't, check out our quick tip videos in the support area. But I can hover over it, and then I can either add it to an additional action plan, this contact, so it can be in 2, or I can stop the existing completely. I can reassign it to a new action plan, or I can just skip the step that is showing me here as the next step. So that's what the action plan button does. Appointment, task, and follow-up call, we've always had shortcuts up at the top, but they weren't labeled. Well, since we took them out of this actions button, because that no longer exists, we labeled them at the top for easy access. It's very clear what the buttons do now. We added the print button up here to the top of the contact form. And it's a dual-purpose button. Depends on what you want to print. If I click print, it's going to ask me, do I want to print a letter? Do I want to send this person, Brandon, a letter, have it print on my printer? Or do I want to print out a hot sheet and take it with me to an appointment or pass it off to a producer on my account or something along those lines? So this is how, with this print button, you can print letters now and hot sheets. And then we have the delete option. You press that, it'll confirm that I want to delete it, and it will delete the record. Very quick, right at your fingertips. We hope you guys really enjoy that. Phew, that was a lot. The next thing we did is regarding calling profiles. We have a lot of folks inside of the Mojo family that are multi-user accounts. And what ends up happening is they'll typically, depending on the user privileges, create calling profiles based on an agent. So if you had 50 agents on an account, and they all had their own calling profile, that gets to be quite a bear when it comes to the admin on the account or the owner, the manager, the owner, looking at the different calling profiles. You have to do a ton of scrolling. Or for an example, if you had expansion teams, you had 5 agents in one market, 10 in another, 5 in another. This all leads us to having folders for calling profiles, which we've done. Now you'll see here I have 4 calling profiles, and there's nothing to indicate there's anything different today than there was yesterday before the update. And the reason for that is we had the developers code it where once you get to the 5th calling profile, it will then give you the option to folder them. So let's take a look at what that looks like. To do this, I have to set up a mock dialing session. And I have to do save as, and I'm going to call it just a Mojo, and I'm going to click save. Now I just simulated setting up a calling profile. Normally you'd go through all the options here and fill everything out correctly and then save it. You'll see now that I've created my 5th profile, there's now a red X that shows up. A red plus sign. And so all I need to do is click on that, give it a name, video, and I'll assign myself and Mojo to it. I click save, and now you'll see that we've created a folder. Only 3 calling profiles are in view because 2 have been stuck into a folder, and I can click expand to view those, or I can click on the triangle again to collapse it. So hopefully those of you in a team really enjoy, and for those of you that requested it in our feedback forums, really enjoy this new feature. It'll save you time. Speaking of saving time, we've come up with update number 3 today, which is the dynamic date range filters. So any column inside of Mojo can be used to create a sublist. Okay, a date column now has a new operator or a new filter that's going to be super powerful for those of you in real estate calling on things like expireds, withdrawals, canceleds, and of course any industry that calls on leads that are date-based, and that date is super important, such as a status change date with off-market leads. So how does it work? Well, this new dynamic date range filter works both in the My Data screen and in the Call Wizard. I'm going to demonstrate creating a sublist with it first, and that'll really seal the deal on what this does. So I'm going to go into the Mojo training list. I'm going to create a sublist. When I come to the sublist screen, I don't have any date columns, unfortunately, other than create date. So to create a sublist, I need to press on the plus button. And a sublist, again, it's just a sublist or a different way to display data that's already in a list. So, for example, you could do one based on city. You could have all your expireds or all of your A leads, and you want to create one with the city Denver only. Well, those leads in the sublist still belong to the main list, but because you've created a sublist, you can work with them independently for things like blast emailing, creating a call session, assigning to an action plan, that kind of stuff. So what does this new dynamic date range filter do? Again, you have to be in a date column, and from the filter area, you're going to want to choose last number of days. Now again, this is dynamic. What does that mean? Well, in Mojo, here's what it means. I can put in last 7 days, and automatically, if this were, let's say, status change date column, it would create a sublist of my expireds, we'll say, that's always the last 7 days, including today. So that's dynamic in that each day that goes by, if you create a sublist for the last 3 days, last 7 days, last 14 days, last 21, you get the idea. Your leads will dynamically move to each sublist as they meet the requirements for that sublist, in this case, a number of days. So if I did last 3 days, and I also had a sublist created called last 7 days, it would eventually move into the last 7, then into the last 14-day sublist, etc. So this is super helpful because today, or prior to today, you've only been able to put in hard dates. and you have to keep going in and changing them, and it's a real pain in the rear end. You don't have to worry about that now. You just select how many days back, and the data filters out. Then I would just click Apply Filters, and I would click Save. We'll call it Last. And then anything in my case with a create date for the last 7 days now shows up under the Mojo training list, last 7 days. And again, this is dynamic. It'll update every day. Super slick. Where else can you use it? You can also use it in the power dialer. Now, to use this, you have to go to the optional dialing filter. Again, because it's a date-based filter, it only shows up for things with a date. And wouldn't you know it, we have status change date as an optional dialing filter. You can click in the from column, and you can then, at the bottom, plug in the last 21 days and click Done. You don't have to put a from and a to. You can just go in and select the amount of days. And this will only pass the data or the leads in the list I'm working on to the dialer that meet that filter. So you have choices. If you're using Mojo as a CRM, for all of the things we can do for marketing and action plans and emailing and whatnot, you may want to sort things on the data side, in the data screen. Or if you're just using us as your dialer, and it's important for you to leverage this type of feature with as little amount of work needed as possible, you can just use the filter here. It won't sort and view, won't be able to view the data like that in your database, but it'll only send that to the dialer. So we're kind of, speaking to two types of Mojo users with this new filter, and we're really excited about it. I'm really excited about tomorrow's release, and you're going to be really excited about it too. I can almost guarantee that. The first thing we're going to talk about is in the settings area, you're going to find a new option in the power dialer that's called Countdown Timer. For years, Mojo's always counted how long you've been dialing for, but you've never been able to say, hey, Mojo, I do the power hour every day. I only want to dial for an hour, prospect for an hour, or 3 hours, or 5 hours. It's never been able to alert you that you've exceeded the amount of time that you had set aside for dialing. That's not the case now. By default, this comes through unchecked. Check this box, use Countdown Timer. Once I've done that, now it's going to show up inside of the power dialer. Let me show you what that looks like. I'm going to queue up my Mojo training list. Get my cell phone ready. And right now we don't see anything because it's not ready to be shown. I have to click on Star Power Dialer. I have to log in to the dialer. And you'll see before I actually call in, it starts to show this new countdown timer. To use it, it's super simple. Let's say I want to prospect for 30 seconds. I use the seconds column up and down. Couldn't get any easier than that, right? I'll use 20 seconds. I may want to prospect for 60 minutes. And I could use that. And by the time this comes out, you'll have the ability to click in here and enter whatever value you want to enter without having to click up. This is still on the development side, but starting tomorrow, that'll be available. So I'm going to go back to 0, just so I can demonstrate for you what this looks like once you've hit the timeout. All right, so I have 20 seconds on the clock. I'm not going to touch anything else. I'm going to dial into the system. All right, I'm going to enter my PIN, and then it's going to lock and load. I press start calling. I press the timer just like I do on my stove, and it begins to count down. All right, the next thing I'm going to demonstrate, the second thing we're going to release tomorrow, is we've added the ability to give follow-up calls a label and a description, as well as mailing labels a label and a description. So if I were to open up a contact, and I come to my follow-up call option, it's going to ask me for a subject, and we're going to call it video. And then we're just going to put in a bunch of garbage text, right? I'm going to schedule that for today, and I'm going to click Save. Now, it shows me the follow-up call has a subject and a description. And this is great because now you don't have to rely on your contact notes for this type of note activity, which can get things clogged up. It can now be down on the follow-up call itself, and it will show you here in its own unique area. As well as over in the calendar, it shows you the follow-up call, the contact's name, and the details of the follow-up call are going to be the subject. So you can see before that call gets made what it is you're calling the person about. It's a really slick little feature. Okay, the other thing that we did is when creating an action plan, when I go to Marketing, Action Plans, Create, when I get to my steps, if I choose Mailing Label, I can now give it a title, and that title shows up on the planner just like I just showed you for the follow-up call. So if you create a mailing label, assuming you're also sending a postcard with that mailing label, you can now say postcard. You could say SOI, postcard, week 1. And when that shows up on your planner, you know that that's the postcard you have to grab out of your bin to send to that contact, simply because it's on the calendar inside of Mojo in the grid. So that's going to save you some time. All right, last but not least, drum roll, please. Down in the integrations area beginning tomorrow, you're going to find the new Google Calendar integration. This new Google Calendar integration is going to allow you to sync Mojo to your Google Calendar in your Google task list without needing to use Zapier, which can be a bear to set up. How does it work? First thing I'm going to do is click on Login with Google account. It's going to ask me to choose an account. I'm going to click Allow, give it permission. And this is one of those times in the video you don't worry about what you see there. And then I come back to integrations, and it's going to ask me to select a calendar to connect to and select a Google task list that I want to bring in to Mojo. So to select my Google Calendar, I just click Select Calendar to connect. And it's going to give me my available options based on the Google account that I just authorized for Mojo to talk to. In this case, you can see here I've got the Mojo Sells a Gmail account here, the calendar, and then all I have to do is select it and I click Save. You may have 5 different calendars. You have to decide which Google Calendar to sync your Mojo appointments with. Now, if you're one of those people that's using Google's new task list feature, you can select a Google task list to send from Google back to Mojo so it shows up on your calendar. It doesn't go the other way. Why is that? Well, it's not supported. What you have to then do is select the type of Mojo event to sync to your Mojo calendar, inside of Google. Whether it's appointments, follow-up calls, or tasks, you can choose all 3. Regardless, appointments you set in Mojo, or follow-up calls that you set in Mojo, and tasks that you set in Mojo are then, as soon as you set them, because you set this up correctly, are going to go right to your Google Calendar in the calendar. We leave by default action plan events unchecked because for those of you that are using action plans, you may have a lot of steps that you assign to people, and by default you probably don't want us cluttering up your Google Calendar. So it's a conscious decision you have to make if you want to assign action plan events, sync them with your Google Calendar. And that's, again, is to save you room in your Google Calendar because action plans tend to have a lot of different scheduled steps in those. And then you're done. You can move on, go back into Mojo, start prospecting, massaging your data. Anything you do as far as setting appointments, follow-up calls, or tasks are going to automatically sync up to the cloud in Google. And anything you set in Google as an appointment or a task can then come back into Mojo, so they're synced in real time. You have transparency in both platforms. That's going to wrap up this very long update video. I apologize for that. We just have a lot of stuff coming out. Again, we've widened the contact form. We've made it dynamic. We've moved some buttons around so you can more efficiently use Mojo. We've added the folder option to the calling profiles. We've created the dynamic date range filters to be used in the data area for creating sublists or in the call wizard. We've added the countdown timer to the dialing bar inside of Mojo. Follow-up calls and mailing labels now have a subject to them and details, as well as this new Google integration with the calendar. So thanks everybody for your support. We appreciate everybody that gave us the input to make this next build. And until next time, Make it a great day.